Oh, howdy all. Grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. So today was day 9 of the spoiler season for the Scourge League. I put up my day 9 summary video. I didn't expect I'd be coming back with another one today. But there was a huge controversy around the Sacred Orb, and this has led to some clarification from Chris Wilson. And what I thought I would do is go through what Chris Wilson's post outlines as to the vision GGG have for the Sacred Orb, and what I think the introduction of this orb will have as its influence on the crafting process for a lot of endgame items. So, firstly, the Sacred Orb, just a quick recap if you missed it, it randomizes the numeric values of base defenses on an armor. So this sounds like a lot of gibberish, but what's happening is that 3.16, as part of the defenses overhaul, is going to introduce a new layer by which some items will be better than others. And this will be changes to base defenses. So for instance, at the moment, in the current 3.15 environment, all Vaal Regalias are the same as each other than their item level and their link situation and sockets and the like. What's changing with this is that some of them will receive a buff of up to 20% on their base energy shield stat. This will be pretty significant, and as a result, it's something that some players said, "Oh, don't like this system. It's going to make the correct crafting bases too rare." Other players said, "Hey, this system's fantastic because it's going to mean that 95% of the items on the ground are just going to be automatically hidden by my loot filter. I've wanted a stricter filter system all along, and this is going to provide it." So what the Sacred Orb does, though, is it provides a way to modify this, what I'm terming Uberquality. So for instance, if you have a Vaal Regalia that drops with 11% Uberquality and you apply a Sacred Orb to it, you might be able to get it as high as 20%. So there's a couple of cases where this is going to be interesting. The first one is going to be on powerful and genuine endgame unique items like Chevron's Wrappings. If you get a Chevron's Wrappings that drops with a really good Divine Orb roll, so let's say it's got on the 100 to 150% increased energy shield roll, let's say that you roll 149%, but its Uberquality is only 3%, it's going to be a disappointing drop if Sacred Orbs don't exist. If they do exist, it's actually going to be a pretty exciting drop, assuming that you're able to use a few Sacred Orbs on it and get it to either a 20%, or if not 20, at least reasonably close. So that's the conflicting sides of whether the Sacred Orb is a good thing or not. Like the sort of situations where it could be good or where it might not be. But Chris Wilson's come along and clarified something that he said, we've been posting things as bite-sized single sentences and pictures that are designed for easy sharing on social media, but this missed a lot of the point with the Sacred Orb. And the key point here is that we don't normally talk about drop rates, but in this case, it will help solve a miscommunication. The Sacred Orb is more than 3 times rarer than an Exalted Orb. It's currently the second rarest currency item after the Mirror of Kalandra. Now, a very quick aside, I kind of think Veiled Chaos Orbs might actually be rarer than 3 times rarer than an Exalt. Maybe my drops have been, my sample size is small. I've probably had maybe 50 Exalted Orbs and 9 Veiled Chaos Orbs have dropped for me in the last 2 leagues. Maybe I've had less Veiled Chaos Orbs than I should for the amount that I play, but that's been my experience. I actually thought that they were rarer than Chris is sort of implying here, with more than 3 times rarer sort of implies it's between 3 and 4, because otherwise you might have said more than 4 times rarer. So anyways, with that in mind, it's something that is going to be a rare item. What that means, firstly, is that until you get quite some way into endgame, you're going to have absolutely zero access to this item. And that's going to mean that you will have absolutely zero expectation from, like, the game will put the expectation on you that you have no access to it. And therefore, the game will be balanced around the assumption that you don't have Sacred Orb enhanced defenses. So that's going to be the way all the way up to, I expect, really, Uncharted Realms invitations in the current endgame. So you should be able to beat all of the Atlas, all of the core bosses, with no use of Sacred Orbs whatsoever, and it should, shouldn't be particularly all that difficult to do so. However, when you're talking about crafting sort of ultimate endgame gear, the access to Sacred Orbs is going to change some of your workflow in terms of how you're going to craft things, what order you're going to do things, and so on and so forth. The first prediction I want to make is that I think that, assuming that when Chris says that they're more than 3 times rarer than an Exalted Orb, I'm just going to assume that they're 3.5 times rarer for the purposes of this video. That may be out by a bit. I don't think it'll be out by an order of magnitude or anything like that. So I'm assuming 3.5 times the rarity of an Exalt. I think at that rarity, these are going to be somewhere around a quarter of an Exalted Orb in price. So why is it that the rarer orb is so much cheaper? The reason for that is that we already have a couple of orbs that are precedents for this. Divine Orbs, Annulment Orbs, and Veiled Chaos Orbs are all considerably rarer than Exalted Orbs. Well, Divines are only slightly rarer, but they're all rarer than Exalts, and they're all much, much, much cheaper. The reason that Exalted Orbs are such an outlier is because they have so much utility for endgame crafters, because they are the denomination that metamods are priced in. Also, because they are the thing that wealthy players use the most of the top-end currency, that also means that they get hoarded as a wealth store as well and used in trade a lot. So this is the reasons that demand for Exalted Orbs is so much higher than it is for Orbs of Annulment, despite the fact that Orbs of Annulment are considerably rarer. So that is the reason, part of the reason that I think that these are going to be around a quarter of an Exalt. If they're wildly off, then that's going to make my predictions on chess piece crafting a little bit different. But I want to go through how the existence of Sacred Orbs is going to impact the crafting workflow for helmets, gloves, boots, and chess pieces. The first thing to note, though, if you are talking about crafting on a low budget, they will have no impact at all. If you're still at a budget where your character you want to have a bone helmet, but you can't afford it, and so you're using an Eternal Burgundy instead, then at that point, you're also just going to ignore the fact that Sacred Orbs exist. You're just going to craft whatever you can and use it, and ultimately maybe come back and craft something better at a later point when you've got the resources to do so. But if the Sacred Orb goes live in its present form and in accordance with the announcement made today, I think that the crafting process for helmets will look like this. Firstly, a whole bunch of players will loot item level 85 and 86 maximum Uberquality bases in bulk. So when you're mapping, you pick up a Hubris Circlet that's I-85 or 86, and you're like, oh, that's got perfect Uberquality on it. Yoink, I'll take that. You're going to stockpile a bunch of these. You'll only get one every few maps or so, but they will eventually add up. When you've got 10 or 20 of them, you'll sell them to someone that is doing Labyrinth enchanting. Or alternately, if you're someone that's quite happy to use enchanted fossils, you might pick up a whole bunch of enchanted fossils yourself and start crafting. Then at this point, you are going to go back to that Labyrinth enchanter and you're going to buy an item of 85 or 86 maximum Uberquality base that already has your correct Labyrinth enchant on it. So at this point, you're basically buying this. This is your starting point in 3.15 crafting anyway. Let's say that you wanted to go with a Hubris Circlet that has the Tornado Shot enchant on it. Then right now you just go to someone that's selling a bunch of enchants, that's doing a lot of enchanting. You buy the Hubris Circlet that has the appropriate enchant on it already, and that's your starting point. And then you're just going to follow exactly the same path that you would use in 3.15. There is one little side exception here, and that is the ritual-specific bases, like a Blizzard Crown. Blizzard Crown is an example where you are going to do something different, and if you're planning to use a Blizzard Crown, then yes, you will use Sacred Orbs on those because the base is rare, and at that point you're going to be beast splitting it as well, once it's got 20 Uberquality. For gloves are going to be a little different. Gloves are not going to care at all about Uberquality. Here, you're just going to source an item of 85 plus base with the correct influence type. This will be either from a drop or from trade. You're going to ignore Uberquality's existence entirely. You're going to roll explicit mods via 3.15 methods. This might be Maven Orbs, depending on your wealth in the league. Might be Awakener Orbs. It might be using Affix Locks and Reforge Plus from Harvest. It might be using fossils if you're working on a lower budget. You're still going to ignore Uberquality and you're going to double corrupt. And you're going to cry and you're going to repeat. You're going to keep crying and keep repeating until eventually you get one of the amazing implicits that is available on a glove. Or if you've got an extremely high budget, you might keep trying until you get two. The reason for this is that the Vaal implicits on gloves are so good that I think you're going to mostly ignore the existence of Sacred Orbs. Gloves have the least amount of the defensive stats available on them, and so that even with the buffs that the defensive stats are getting in 3.16, I don't think that the opportunity cost is there. And the only situation which you're going to use a Sacred Orb on a set of gloves, in my opinion, is going to be on the Cirrus gloves. If you get a 5 implicit corrupted set of Cirrus gloves, Hands of the High Templar, then maybe you will use a Sacred Orb on one of those. Next we have boots. This is an Awakener Orb dominated crafting flow here for some funny reason. Your starting point is going to be to grab Tailwind boots and not care about its Uberquality. Optionally elevate the Tailwind. So once you've done this, you will then source your second piece with 20 Uberquality, item level 86, influence it via Conqueror Exalt, and potentially change the influence via Harvest if you need to do so. Roll that second set of boots, and then Awakener Orb the two together. Your final product will be item level 86 and 20 Uberquality, but it will not be reliant upon your Tailwind boots having any Uberquality on them. Finally, we have the chest piece. And the chest piece, you're going to do something a bit different. This is going to use Sacred Orbs in it. Now, this is my current prediction. If it turns out that Sacred Orbs are more expensive than I expect, let's say they turn out to be an Exalt or so, then you might handle this a bit differently. But your starting point is going to be item level 85 plus 6 link that comes from divination cards. This could be White Knight, Dapper Prodigy, Draped in Dream, or the Sacrifice. Potentially there's others as well. Usually the starting point for any crafted chest piece is getting it as a 6 link, and the best sources of 6 links do tend to be divination cards at the moment. I do believe that it will cost more to 6 link an item than it will to Sacred Orb an item to perfection. Again, if that's wrong, then you'll just change around a couple of pieces in this flow. If the item's not influenced, you're going to Sacred Orb it first, then you are going to Beast Split it. Otherwise, you're going to skip a couple of steps. Step 3, you're going to Conqueror Exalt it. And then step 4, you're going to roll 1 elevated influence mod on the armor. Then prepare a second item with another elevated mod. You're then going to Awaken Orb the two together, Affix Lock, Reforge Plus, or Affix Lock Veiled Chaos Orb, depending upon your budget. So, in this context, this is where you are going to use Sacred Orbs. You're going to use them in step 2 if the item is not influenced. Otherwise, if the item is influenced, you can actually wait until the very end of the workflow to apply Sacred Orbs, and maybe only apply Sacred Orbs if you hit something truly, truly outstanding, like if your Awakener Orb was far better than usual. So with all of that in mind, I have gone from being broadly negative about the introduction of the Sacred Orb to taking more of a wait and see approach. Given that it's going to be quite rare, it's not going to be some sort of annoying makework to do. If you're someone who is less than a 50 Exalta League player in terms of total wealth, I think you should just regard Sacred Orbs as a bonus piece of loot that you're going to get every now and again. It's just going to be an extra drop you'll get sometimes that you can sell to other players. You won't see many of them, but when you do, it'll be a welcome little extra bonus. I think of it like, depending upon how valuable they end up being, it might be like getting a Saint's Treasure divination card. It might be like getting an Abandoned Wealth divination card if I'm wrong and they end up being more valuable. It's always something you're really happy to see, but it's not something that's a big part of your league wealth, nor is it something that a crafting system you particularly engage with all that much. If you're someone that does a lot of higher end crafting, I think it's just going to be a new meta. I don't think it's necessarily going to be any better or worse. And one thing that's always positive about change is that it is something new to play around with. So on that basis, I'm kind of keen to see how it goes. I don't have high expectations for the system, but I'm very open to being proven wrong on that. I'm open to finding out that it's better than I expect it to be. Anyways, that's my thoughts. If you've got any comments or questions, definitely fire away below. Otherwise, may your Vaal Orbs have interesting results, and remember to use them after Sacred Orbs. Otherwise, you will not be able to use a Sacred Orb on your item.